He's a skilled broadcaster, but he can't even hang a picture, wire a plug, and he also has a beard to hide his many, many chins. It's Darren Antrobus.
Hi, Joshua. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Darren. Thanks for having me on.
See, you can tell you're a therapist. You've got that really calm way of speaking. So I'm already like, carry on speaking. Joshua Fletcher, you've been all over the place. You've been talking about panic attacks on the Daily Express back in the autumn. You've also talked about all of this kind of stuff in a lockdown situation on BBC Bite Size as well. And you've also guest appearance on BBC Radio Manchester, BBC Radio Merseyside, and BBC Radio Lancashire as well. And now you are here with me.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me. Right. Okay. So, people's well-being in lockdown. This is a personal story for me, Joshua, if you don't mind me saying so, because I do suffer with my weight. I'm a big guy. When there was no lockdown and no virus, and I could go to the gym whenever I wanted to, I lost 5 stone in 5 months. I just can't get a hold of it. So my mental well-being is rock bottom at the moment anyway. But what can people do in lockdown just to, get a hold of themselves?
It's a good question. For me, I specialize in anxiety, and what I've noticed is that naturally the whole country's anxiety has gone up, and particularly in lockdown 3, and in any trilogy, the third one's always the worst, isn't it? And I think this is what's happened now. What I've been telling people is actually less doing really and more being, because I believe that when we learn how to kind of turn off internal critical chatter that we have, i.e. I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be doing that, and have a bit of compassion for ourselves, we stop acting anxiously, we stop withdrawing, and we naturally do the things that we want to do anyway. But we all have an inner rebel. So if I tell myself, oh, it's lockdown, I've got to learn jiu-jitsu and Mandarin and lose 5 stone or whatever, well, it's really stressful, actually. It's anxiety inducing for everyone, for all types of anxiety, by the way, which I'll talk about in a bit if you want. A lot of people have kind of misinterpreted lockdown as like a free pass, when actually, no, it's incredibly stressful. I miss my friends. I miss the routine. I've moved my office to here where you can see me now. And it's a bit like there's a lot of things that are stressful. So, I'd like to reframe it as, it's a time for you to kind of just get through it. There's nothing you have or should be doing, you're doing enough as it is. And I found that with clients in particular, when you kind of cultivate that attitude, they naturally start to do things creatively and naturally start to do things out of self-care anyway, which is a product of when you speak to yourself nicely.
When people suffer from anxiety, does it go hand in hand with depression a little bit, where the people that are suffering it or dealing with it don't know that it's happening to them? So it's the outsiders, the people that are seeing them going, your levels are going up a little bit.
Anxiety can be comorbid with depression a lot, but it can just exist on its own too. But anxiety itself is a very broad word. And it kind of, as someone who's an advocate for talking about anxiety and disordered anxiety, it can be very frustrating for people who struggle with disordered anxiety, hearing about people describing mild stress as anxiety, because the disordered anxiety can be extremely debilitating. And I know since the pandemic that disordered anxiety has gone through the roof. Now, what I mean by conventional and disordered anxiety is that conventional anxiety is I'm worried about things external. So I'm worried about, my future, my job. I'm worried about my career, my relationship, my weight, my health, these kind of things. And that's kind of conventional external anxiety that we can all experience. However, you've got the internal disordered anxiety too. And this is the stuff that isn't spoken about. And this is what I speak about very openly. And people go, oh, really? Oh, I have suffered from that, but I've never had a word for it. And that's the anxiety where we start having panic attacks. It's the anxiety where we have intrusive, horrible, taboo-ridden thoughts that we can't talk about. It's the anxiety where we feel detached from our surroundings and feel a sense of unreality. It's when we constantly have what if, 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 and we're in our heads and ruminating for the majority of the day. It's people who have obsessive compulsive disorder who clean. That's just one example of OCD. OCD can be many things, particularly around the pandemic as well. You can have people with health anxiety, social anxiety, and in particular, no surprise, agoraphobia, which is the people who are scared to leave their safe space. And that's the stuff that I like to talk about, because I'm very open about it. I've written, obviously, my books on it. I'm a previous sufferer of it, and it's what got me into therapy. And that's why I invite people to do. If you're anxious, what type of anxiety have you got? Have you got the conventional kind of anxiety? Have you got the disordered, inwards, am I freaking out, I'm scared of panic kind of anxiety? Or have you got a mixture of them both? You know.
So if somebody's listening to this and they think they are suffering from some sort of anxiety, what are the first steps they need to do? Because I suppose it's all right for somebody to say, oh, get a hobby, go and talk to somebody, but it's quite hard, isn't it, when your mind's going overtime?
Oh, definitely. And it's a great question. For me, the first thing I say is that you're okay. Identify the presentation of your anxiety first, because anxiety is like broad word. You know, I'm anxious about my exam. I'm anxious about the interview. No, how does it present? And some people might say, no, I wake up with a sense of dread and doom and I can't stop fixating on it. And then I catastrophize and interpret everything as its worst case scenario. And then I'd say, well done. Now you know how your anxiety presents. You know, how does it present physically? Oh, I get heart palpitations. I get tension. I feel sick. My digestion goes through the roof. You know, it goes all over the place. And then that's a good way to identify it too. And then identify the feelings behind it. Do you feel like a sense of unease? You know, because a lot of people just have a general sense of unease, and that's anxiety. Or do you feel a real terror, a real doom? And that's what I do. I put it into 3 different parts, you know, thoughts, feelings, sensations. And when you've circled around that, then you're more in touch with your anxious presentation. And every anxious presentation is really common. You know, there's nothing, I don't think I've ever heard of anxious presentation for me personally where I've gone, wow, that's unique. You know, even with scary existential thoughts, I hear them all, I hear them too. And so I say, identify how your anxiety is first, and then, yeah, take it to someone who understands, like a therapist. If it's really debilitating, take it to a doctor. But for me, I love, do that too, do your due diligence. But actually reading up on it and learning about your anxiety is really empowering. That's how I overcame my disorder. Was that I read some books and read up and learned about anxiety, learned I wasn't ill. You know, it's categorized as an illness, but I wasn't ill, I wasn't broken. I didn't need anything to fix me. It was just understanding it and reassuring myself that I was okay. And that's what I advise to people.
Let me give you an example. I don't know whether I suffer from anxiety. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me if I do or not.
Okay.
So I do worry about my career, because in the radio industry, a lot of radio stations have been bought out. A lot of my really good friends have lost the gigs and all that kind of stuff. So I worry that this building's going to get sold off, going to lose my gig. I don't know how to do anything else in life. When I worry about that, I go and have junk food. I go and have, that's my comfort. That's my crutch. Is that anxiety then?
Yeah, that's conventional anxiety. Yeah, because right. What you do is and that's okay. You know, obviously, I'm not condoning go and eat junk food or whatever, but for me, that is comforting. That's having the worry and trying to extinguish the worry using some form of comfort. And again, that's really common, and to an extent, I do that too, even as a psychotherapist. Not necessarily junk food, but just that I will have some kind of crutch. For me, though, I'd look at kind of. Is that addressing the worry? Why is that the worry so much? Don't get me wrong, you're allowed to worry about your job, everyone does. But it's interesting if you ever want to, is to look at the crutch of that. You know, it's really interesting. There's someone called a really good social media account called the binge eating therapist, where doesn't do diets, or I think she's called Sarah Desange. And she doesn't do talk about diet. She talks about the psychology behind the eating and why you do it. And I think you'd see kind of answers behind that. Yeah, definitely. I know many people that use food as a crutch, and to an extent, I do too now and then. But yeah, it depends whether your relationship with that crutch. it's now and then, that's great. But if you know that you're someone who kind of puts on a lot of weight and then loses a lot of weight and puts on a lot of weight and loses a lot of weight, then maybe you can have a look behind that. But obviously, the source is quite clear, isn't it? I like my job. I don't want to lose it, so I'm trying to cope with it.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to somebody who is right now struggling? Then, like I said to you before, it's all right saying to people, go and talk to somebody or go and seek medical help and all that kind of stuff. But it is quite difficult, isn't it? Do they have to go and seek out a psychotherapist or a specialist? Do they have to do that?
This is the thing that as counselling, particularly now, and I still see a counsellor now. Counselling now is very affordable. Person-centered counselling in particular, and remember this for anyone who wants to talk to someone. Person-centered counselling is someone who will provide you a space, and now it's remote, so you can pick from counsellors all over the country. If you're uncomfortable talking to someone, say in your local village, which some people have, then go and pick someone who's living in Newcastle. Go pick someone living in Northern Ireland, because they're not near, and they will provide you a space. My therapist is over the telephone, so I put my counsellor in my phone in my ear, and I just talk about stuff and get it off my chest, and it's really helpful because a problem shared is a problem halved and all that cliche. On admitting it and actually telling someone maybe you've got a problem helps to lift the burden. A lot of people who are anxious in particular think that if they voice it, it will make their anxiety worse. No, it doesn't. The anticipation makes your anxiety worse, but when you say it, it's like a relief. And this applies to anxiety and depression as well, or if stuff that you've been holding on to for years. I was one of these. I grew up in Lancashire, and in a very kind of strong, like single mindset town of anxiety. Talking about your feelings is weakness and all that. And once I overcome that, I was like, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. What a ridiculous fallacy that we all subscribe to. And once I realized that it's okay to kind of talk about stuff and no one's judging me, and it's actually strength to talk about stuff now, that's why I'm very open. And I think that's why I do so well on social media, is because I'm just very open about it and I own it as well. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm like, no, I'm still great and I'm flawed, and I think modeling that's really good as well. But yeah, looking at being able to have an outlet. Some people don't have the right people around them, unfortunately, to, they might respond with, oh, what have you got to worry about? Or pull yourself together, or, have you tried meditation? Rather than just kind of like, it's nothing to fix. Just the act of talking about something in itself is incredibly powerful. And I know that's what got me into therapy. As to being a therapist, like, whoa, talking helps. Who'd have thought that?
If somebody does seek out some counselling for anything that they're going through, how's it going to look when they go for therapy? Is it going to be like what you see on the films, like a guy in a tweed jacket with glasses halfway down his nose, notepad, and you're lying on a sofa telling them all your problems? Is that what it's going to look like?
Well, I do my therapy here. I mean, I specialize in stuff, but this is my chair for therapy. This is what you see. And it's really funny because I'm actually wearing my running shorts afterwards. I didn't realize I was being filmed. So the bottom half of running, I'm sitting in running shorts. No, not at all. There's different types and different modalities of therapy. And what really annoys me is that people don't know these things. So person-centered therapy is, imagine there's a room that you can go to where someone will sit there and just listen, reflect, and talk to you and be on your side about something. They'll tell you when you're wrong, not wrong, but they'll tell you when that doesn't sound right. But that's person-centered therapy, and in general, it's very affordable. You're not paying hundreds of pounds for some specialist who's got 5 PhDs. You're talking to someone who's dedicated their training to being a therapist because they want to be a therapist, and they're not interested in power dynamics or telling you how to live your life. They're there to be there for you, to provide you that space. Then you've got things like other modalities where, particularly like psychodynamic modality, which is the lie on the sofa, my name's Sigmund, let's talk about your mum and dad, which if you want to do that you can, but they're quite rare nowadays. And there's different modalities like transactional analysis, which is good for analyzing relationships. If you've got trouble with relationships, or trouble with conflict, I find that's really helpful. And CBT, which is really good for things like disordered behavior. So CBT for, say, an eating habit, or CBT for panic attacks and avoidance, is fantastic. I train in CBT and person-centered. So what I like to do is provide the room for people to talk, and then use a bit of CBT for the homework and stuff at the end, so they can do things between sessions. But to what to expect with counseling, and that's such a good question, because people don't really ask it. Another thing you can do now as well is, if you go on websites looking for a counselor, like Counseling Directory or Psychology Today, therapists have actually uploaded videos of themselves, so you can see who you're talking to, and you can just scroll through them going, nah, dodgy haircut, nah, I don't like their voice, nah, until someone's like, yeah, I could talk to them. And then you can ring them up and say, can we have 10 minutes, see if it works out, like, yeah, and then you book in. It's really, I can see why it's daunting for a lot of people, and it was daunting for me, and it was daunting for my first session. But then it got to a stage where I look forward to it. I felt safe to do it.
Maybe some people that are a little bit embarrassed to make that first move. I know that I've got friends who I know they're suffering somehow, but they won't be man enough to go, yeah, I'm struggling, guys. I'm gonna have to go speak to somebody. They'll go, been out for a bike ride, or no, I'm all right. I'll just open another bottle of beer. A very manly kind of, I'm gonna be all right.
Yeah, and it's that attitude that I'm looking like. Don't get me wrong, I like masculinity. I celebrate masculinity a lot. And what I'm trying to do and model is that you can still be masculine and seek help, because ultimately, being real, the biggest killer of men is depression. And this emotional conservatism doesn't help. It was needed many years ago, in the World War II, but it's ingrained still in society and culture. And no matter how many world mental health days we have and stuff, you're not going to hammer the message home until you actually model it. People like myself, you included, doing this, being open and honest, and a radio interview, which I love. It's like, kind of, until that's normalized as strength rather than weakness. We revere emotional conservatism too much. I mean, I remember last year, I admittedly I had one too many beers, and I was walking home, and someone had a giant poster of "Keep calm, carry on," and slogans like that are an example of how we celebrate not being emotional. Keep calm and carry on is literally what your friend does when he goes for a 30-mile bike ride, yet he's got demons in his head. It's not about keeping calm. It's about, why don't you sit there and talk about what's going on in a safe space? Why are you walking around with all this buried under you? And I've known people in my life who've committed suicide and tried to commit suicide, and it's because of social constructs and social stigmas and taboos like that. And you get a lot of people once a year going, oh, we need to talk about it more, and then back on with it. Rather, I'm here to talk, but not really. Just normalizing it on a social level, I think, is so important. And that's what I try to do. On my Instagram page, I recorded myself having an anxiety attack in the middle of Manchester. Wow. And I went live and showed it, and everyone was like, I didn't realize how I think it's had like 50,000 views now or something like that. And it was like, and I talked through what it was like to have an anxiety attack. I wasn't on the floor rolling around crying. I was like, this is intense, but it's okay. And actually, me just talking about it is making me feel better. So yeah, it's just an example modeling it, and I'm glad people like you are doing it too.
But I suppose the argument to that, Joshua, will be that because you're a professional in this, you know how to hide that, or you know how to, you know how to cover that up a little bit. Where somebody else who doesn't know how to deal with it will probably go, and just lose it.
No, the vast majority of panic attacks are myth. It's interesting. The vast majority of panic attacks no one sees. Which is, but I must have seen about 1,000 people with panic disorder in my practice since I set it up.
Wow.
And I could count on one hand the amount of people that had a visible, disturbing panic attack. And I know and when I say visible, I don't mean climbing the walls. I mean like that. That was all I saw. And one person ran out the room, but they chose to run out the room. Like Actually, most people don't see it. People, and this is the part of the problem. You can stand in a room full of people and you won't notice someone's having an anxiety attack. They'll go quiet, they'll go insular. And this is what I call a Netflix panic attack, when people think in their heads that panic attack, everyone can see them and they're like on the floor, grabbing their collar. And don't get me wrong, your heart pounds, but no one else can hear it in Dolby surround sound. And having flashbacks and all. No, that's not how anxiety attacks work. It's just a surge of adrenaline. But everyone has surges of adrenaline. When you're waiting for a job interview, you have a surge of adrenaline. You don't call that a panic attack, do you? Yeah, you're right. To an extent, I'm more confident with my anxiety attacks, definitely, because I've had panic disorder and I've learned about it. But in general, people who have anxiety attacks, they choose to seek reassurance. They're not losing control.
But I like the idea of, the old-fashioned way of, if you're having a panic attack, you get a brown paper bag, and the bag's going up, and you're shaking your head, Joshua. No,
no, don't do that.
No, all right.
Don't do anything. People always say the amount of people that come to me. Like it actually got published in two major British newspapers. They contacted me like, you're the anxiety expert. What do people do when having an anxiety attack? And I said, nothing. And they're like, what? We can't fill an article with that. I was like, you don't do anything, because, put it this way, a panic attack is when your amygdala in your brain is tricked into thinking there's danger. And that's caused by lots of stress, because it doesn't get stress. It doesn't get that your job is on the line. It doesn't get that you've had an argument. It doesn't get money. It doesn't get things like that. It doesn't get coronavirus. What it does get, though, is it misinterprets stress. And when it misinterprets stress, it causes panic attacks. Now, people fall into the trap, like me, of fearing the panic attacks. So if I have a panic attack and my amygdala is watching me, not liking the panic attack, freaking out over the panic attack, doing everything, breathing into brown paper bags, on all fours, doing diaphragmatic breathing, tapping and distracting, running away, ringing the ambulance, which happened to me. I've ended up in A&E with a panic attack.
Wow.
Then the amygdala thinks that panic is dangerous in itself. So the next time I have a sensation, it's not going to go away. And that's why they've stopped doing it. Paramedics do not do that now. They don't give you brown paper bags, because it doesn't teach you that you can cope with adrenaline rushes. Every time you panic, and you go to do something, you're teaching the amygdala that panic itself is dangerous. So I've had hundreds of poor people sat in opposite me in my practice going, I'm panicking, what do I do? And I'm like, no, because it's not dangerous. You're not hurting yourself, and it passes. It's adrenaline. You can handle adrenaline. You can handle the racing thoughts. Watch. And 20 minutes later, lo and behold, they're sat there going, you know what? It's the first time I've ever not done anything in response to panic. I was like, because you can cope.
Wow.
And that's
that's ace, that is. That's ace.
Genuinely, that's what happens there.
I've circled the word "the panic room" on my piece of paper anyway. So tell us about the panic room. Is that your thing, is it?
Yeah, so it was originally in Salford, and I set it up after recovering myself as a coaching practice. And then I trained to be a psychotherapist, so I could really take it seriously, because I didn't think it would take off, and it did. People would read my first book and go, who is this guy? He gets me. And then found the panic room. I was like, oh yeah, that's great. So it was in Salford. Now I work from this room here for obvious reasons. And yeah, it's a practice set up for people who struggle with all forms of anxiety. Now it's a practice for everyone, because I'm a qualified psychotherapist, so I work with depression and many things. But the majority of my clients still find me to talk about their anxiety specifically for them. It's a hub for everything I do now, though, the panic room. So, if anyone ever looks at it, that's where I have my podcast that's accessible for everyone. That's where it's a hub for articles, my books, things like that. And I've kept it really. And then I've more kind of gone on to and I was talking to you before about modeling behavior. So I've actually gone under the guise, but I've under the name of Anxiety Josh, which is what most people can find me on social media, because I thought, rather than hiding behind the panic room and pretending to be the expert, which I am, but like kind of pretending like I'm completely infallible and beyond anxiety. I just thought, no, I'll call myself Anxiety Josh, because sometimes I get anxiety too. And I found that since I've moved to, no one's ever questioned me as a psychotherapist, even though I'm open and honest about my own anxieties. In fact, it's gone the opposite way. People are like, it's really refreshing to see this, that you're not trying to put yourself on a pedestal, and you still are an expert. It's not undermined me whatsoever. And I found that actually really refreshing. So yeah, the panic room is kind of the title for what I do a lot of the time.
So people's well-being and thoughts are going haywire because of, we don't know how this thing coronavirus is going to play out, and everything that wrapped around that as well. What would you say to somebody then who is having some sort of panic attack, anxiety attack, whatever you want to call it? What are the I tell you what, Joshua, here's a challenge: 3 top tips that people need to do if they feel like, or they notice somebody might be having some sort of an attack. Or 5 top tips, whichever you want to do.
Okay, well, all right. I'll explain an analogy that I use that everyone can use, and then I'll use that to buy time to think about it. First of all, conceptualize it like a jug. So we all have a stress jug. Okay, the size of the stress jug depends on genetics. So if your mum and dad were warriors, then you're in trouble. My mum and dad were warriors, so I'm in trouble. It doesn't mean I'm going to get panic attacks, but it means that my ability to tolerate stress is less. So when the stress jug fills up, i.e. pandemic, homeschooling, tension at home, career uncertainty, not eating and sleeping well, grief, health conditions, whatever, when that jug fills up, that's when you're more prone to panic attacks. So tip number 1 is to say, this is supposed to happen. I'm stressed. Doesn't mean I'm broken. Number 2 is that I'm not going crazy. I'm not losing my mind. If I feel on edge and this, that, reassure yourself. It's okay. That's actually a normal threat response that's been part of our bodies for thousands of years. It's not exclusive to you. Number 3 is a very important one, and that is personal boundaries. If you're suddenly having anxiety attacks, you've got to learn to say no. You've got to turn off work after a certain time, or dedicate time to worrying. Don't be lying in bed at 11 p.m. worrying about stuff, because that's going to affect your sleep, and it's not good personal boundaries. If you need some time, space for yourself, which is number 4, massive one, you're not selfish. You're actually doing everyone a favor. I need a lot. I'm quite introverted sometimes, so I need a lot of space for myself, and that's just me sat there playing on my computer or whatever, and that's good because that means I can rest and recharge. So that's a good tip for me. And 5 is if you are struggling with anxiety and stuff like that, look at some really good resources on it. There's really nice books out there, reassuring books, nothing to scare you, nothing full of academic jargon. Look at resources, even things on like the Mind website and charities like that can really help. So yeah, the main ones are, you're not going crazy, you are normal. It's absolutely fine to have a full stress jug. It's absolutely fine sometimes for your body to release a threat response. I think it's now 1 in 4 people experience some form of disordered anxiety, never mind conventional anxiety. And yeah, you're definitely not alone in it. And as the days go on, you'll find more and more people talking about it.
Joshua Fletcher, some really good points there, by the way, and it's been really refreshing to talk to you as well. It's helped me.
Yeah.
So I got a free session there, Joshua. Thank you very much for that.
I'll invoice you after.
Yeah, I'll tell you what though, what's made my anxiety and my mind go all over the place is I'm missing the gym so much. It's all right. Yeah. I can't go out and run out there. I don't run in pubs. No way. But I love I love the gym. The gym is where I go and I binge watch things while I'm on the cross trainer and I'm doing the stuff. I love that.
That's your personal boundaries as well, isn't it? It's my time away for me in the gym, to be in my head, to exercise, to flood my brain with serotonin and dopamine, to feel good about myself. Yeah, I could see why you really missed that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I've signed the petition, get the gyms open and everything. Brilliant. Joshua, thank you very much for your time. Where can people find you, by the way, if they want to speak to you in more depth anyway?
Yeah, you can find me on social media. It's Anxiety Josh. On Instagram in particular, I do particularly well on that. The Panic Room, you can just type in thepanicroom.co.uk, or even, the self-indulgence doesn't stop there. I've got a website called joshuafletcher.co.uk. And you can all find it, all links into one, the podcasts and things like that. It's a free resource as well. It's not, I don't benefit financially from the podcast. It's just a resource for people to access.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you very much, Joshua.
He's a skilled broadcaster, but he can't even hang a picture, wire a plug, and he also has a beard to hide his many, many chins. It's Darren Antrobus.